Welcome back. What you are about to hear is not a story about heroes or legends. This is a confession from the war, a testimony from someone who survived 18 orbital drops as an ODST. This video is about the brutal reality of being an orbital drop shock trooper, about strapping into a metal coffin and being fired at a planet, about the terror of re-entry, about watching your brothers die in pods that never opened, about surviving when better people did not, and carrying that weight for the rest of your life. You have heard the propaganda, you have seen the recruitment videos, now hear the truth. The drops were not glorious, they were controlled chaos. Most ODSTs died in their first 7 missions. The ones who survived longer did so through pure luck. This is about what it really cost to be a Helljumper, not in equipment or resources, but in bodies and minds and souls. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. This is not entertainment. This is memory. This is testimony. This is the story the UNSC does not want told. So listen, remember, and understand what humanity really paid to survive the war. They tell you it will be like falling, clean, controlled, a calculated descent from the heavens into hell. But they never tell you about the smell inside the pod, sweat and fear and recycled air thick enough to choke on. They never tell you that the moment before launch, when the clamps release and you hear nothing but your own heartbeat thundering against your ribcage, you will wonder if this is the drop that kills you. I strapped into my SOEIV for the first time in 2548, 4 years into my service as an orbital drop shock trooper, 4 years of proving I could be more than just another Marine with a rifle. The pod sealed around me with a hiss that sounded like a tomb closing, cold titanium pressed against my back. My fingers found the harness restraints by muscle, memory. Click, click, click. 3 points of contact between me and survival. Outside, I could hear the muffled sounds of the drop bay, boots on metal, voices calling coordinates. Somewhere in the darkness, 50 other pods were being loaded with 50 other bodies. We were the 11th Shock Troops Battalion. We were the best humanity had to offer against the Covenant. We were about to drop onto Harvest, a planet the aliens had been glassing for 3 years. The deployment officer's voice crackled through my helmet speaker. 30 seconds to launch. My hands were shaking. I told myself it was the cold. Everyone told themselves it was the cold. Through the tiny viewport in front of my face, I could see the drop bay's ceiling, harsh white lights, hydraulic arms moving pods into launch tubes. Then my pod jerked forward. The mechanical arms grabbed me, lifted me, rotated me until I was vertical. The launch tube stretched out before me, like a gun barrel pointed at the stars. I could see other pods ahead of mine. Small metal coffins lined up for the firing squad. This is what they never show you in the recruitment videos. They show you the glory. The moment the pod door kicks open and you step out onto enemy soil with your rifle ready, they show you the victories. What they do not show you is the 45 seconds of terror between launch and impact. 10 seconds. The countdown started in my helmet. I took a breath, held it. The first time you drop, they tell you to breathe normally, steady your heart rate, stay calm. But there is no staying calm when you know that in a few seconds, you will be moving at terminal velocity through an atmosphere filled with Covenant plasma fire. Every anti-aircraft battery on the surface will be tracking your pod. Every Banshee pilot will see you as target practice. And if you survive the descent, if your pod does not burn up or get shot down or suffer a mechanical failure, you still have to survive the landing. A 40-foot fall at 30 meters per second. The harness and crash padding will absorb most of it, but not all. I have seen what happens when a pod lands wrong, when the braking thrusters misfire or the ground is softer than the computer calculated. I have seen pods buried 10 feet deep in mud. I have seen them shattered against rocks. I have seen them cracked open like eggs, with the occupants still strapped inside, still breathing, still conscious, still waiting for someone to find them before the Covenant does. 3, 2, 1. The launch tube fired. Gravity disappeared. My stomach tried to climb out through my throat. The pod shot forward like a bullet, and suddenly I was not in the drop bay anymore. I was in space. Pure black void scattered with stars. Below me, harvest burned. Orange and red flames crawled across the planet's surface, where the Covenant had been systematically destroying every human settlement. From orbit, it looked almost beautiful, like a painting of hell. My pod began to spin, slow at first, then faster. The computer was orienting me for re-entry. Through the viewport, I watched the planet rotate, watched it grow larger, watched the stars disappear behind the curve of atmospheric haze. The radio was silent, 50 pods falling in perfect formation, 50 Helljumpers making their drop. I tried to remember the briefing. Our target was a UNSC firebase that had gone dark 2 days ago. Intel suggested Covenant ground forces had overrun it. Our job was to drop in, eliminate hostiles, and secure the garrison before reinforcements arrived. Standard shock trooper work. Get in fast, hit hard, get out. Except it never worked that way. Not really. The pod hit the atmosphere. The viewport blazed white, heat shield activated. Temperature inside the pod spiked from freezing to burning in 3 seconds. My armor's cooling system kicked in, but it was not enough. Sweat ran down my face, down my neck, soaked into the undersuit. The pod rattled like it was tearing itself apart. Every bolt, every weld, every seam screaming under the stress of re-entry. I heard a metallic groan that did not sound right. Something in the pod's superstructure, bending under forces it was not designed to handle. For a moment, I wondered if this was it, if I would burn up in the atmosphere like a meteor, if anyone would even know. But the heat shield held. The shaking intensified until my teeth rattled and my vision blurred. Then the worst part started. Covenant anti-aircraft fire. I could not see it through the viewport. The heat shield glow was too bright, but I felt it. The shock waves as plasma bolts detonated in the air around me. The computer screaming collision warnings. The sudden jerks as the pod's thrusters fired, trying to evade incoming fire. A pod exploded to my left. I did not see it. I felt it. A wave of pressure that slammed into my pod and sent me spinning. The computer shrieked. The thrusters fired full burn. I tumbled through the air like a stone. For 5 seconds, I did not know which way was up. Did not know if I was ascending or falling. Did not know if the next plasma bolt would punch through my heat shield and cook me alive. Then, the computer regained control. The thrusters corrected my trajectory. The spinning stopped. I was falling again, falling toward harvest, falling toward the mission, falling toward whatever waited on the ground. The heat shield peeled away. Altitude indicators scrolled down. 10,000 meters, 8,000, 6,000. I could see the surface now, not the beautiful planet Harvest used to be, not the agricultural paradise it was before the Covenant came. This was a scorched wasteland, blackened earth, burning forests, cities reduced to ash. 4,000 meters. The braking thrusters kicked in. G-forces slammed me back against the seat. The harness cut into my shoulders. I tasted blood, bit my tongue without realizing it. 2,000 meters. I could see the firebase now, a cluster of paa-spliced, prefabricated buildings surrounded by defensive walls, smoke rising from a dozen fires. Covenant dropships circling overhead. 1,000 meters. The ground rushed up to meet me. I braced, every muscle tight, every nerve firing. 500 meters. Another pod exploded. Closer this time. I saw the flash through my viewport, saw the debris scatter across the sky, saw another Helljumper die before they ever touched ground. 200 meters. The final braking burn. Maximum thrust. The pod screamed. The thrusters roared. The world turned white. Impact. My head snapped forward. The harness caught me. Pain shot through my chest. Ribs bruised, maybe cracked. The pod door explosive bolts fired. The hatch flew off. Cold air rushed in. Smoke and ash and the smell of burning plastic. I hit the quick release on my harness, grabbed my MA5C assault rifle from the weapon rack, kicked the door wider, rolled out of the pod into a war zone. Plasma fire everywhere. grunts chattering in their high-pitched alien language, elites barking orders, the distinctive crack of UNSC rifles somewhere in the smoke. I took cover behind my pod, assessed the situation. 10 other pods had landed in visual range. 5 were burning. 2 had their doors still sealed, occupants dead or wounded. 3 had troopers actively engaging the enemy. We were spread out, scattered across 200 meters of open ground. Exactly what you do not want when you are outnumbered and outgunned. A grunt spotted me, raised its plasma pistol. I put 3 rounds through its mask before it could fire. The body jerked backward. Methane leaked from the shattered tank. It collapsed in a heap. This was not my first drop, not even my 10th. But every time felt like the first. Every time that moment between landing and engaging carried the same electric terror. The same realization that I was on the ground with nothing but my armor and my rifle against an enemy that wanted to exterminate my entire species. The radio crackled. Squad leads calling for rally points, casualty reports, requests for fire support. I keyed my mic. Lance Corporal Graves reporting, Pod 739er, Firebase perimeter, engaging hostiles. The squad leader responded immediately. Graves, rally on Pod 752. We are consolidating at the garrison entrance. I looked around, spotted the pod maybe 50 meters away. Between me and it was open ground, crawling with Covenant. I reloaded my rifle, even though I had barely fired it, checked my sidearm, 2 frag grenades on my belt. Standard loadout for a standard suicide run. I took a breath, steady now, calm. This is what 4 years of training built for. This is what I volunteered for when I joined the ODSTs. I stepped out from behind my pod and started running. Plasma bolts streaked past me, one so close I felt the heat through my armor. Another impacted the ground 2 feet to my right. Melted dirt sprayed across my boots. I did not stop, did not slow down. Stopping meant dying. An elite emerged from the smoke ahead, energy sword ignited, blue blade humming with lethal energy. It saw me, roared, charged. I brought my rifle up, fired full auto. Rounds sparked off its shields. The elite kept coming. 20 meters, 15, 10. At 5 meters, its shields collapsed. My next burst caught it in the chest. Purple blood sprayed. It stumbled, fell, slid to a stop at my feet. I jumped over its body and kept running. This is what they teach you in ODST training. Speed is survival. Hesitation is death. Never stop moving until you reach cover or complete the objective. A jackal sniper took a shot at me from a rooftop, missed. I put a grenade through the window where it was hiding, heard the explosion. Did not wait to confirm the kill. Another elite stepped into my path. This one with a plasma rifle. It opened fire. Bolts hammered my chest plate. My shields were nothing compared to Spartan gear. My armor was just ceramic plating over a titanium frame. It stopped some rounds. Not all. Heat burned through, seared my skin. I felt something crack. Another rib maybe. I dropped and rolled, came up firing, caught the elite in the leg. It stumbled. I put the rest of my magazine into its exposed head. It went down. I reached pod 752 30 seconds later. Dove behind it, pressed my back against the metal. Gasped for air. My chest burned. My lungs screamed. Adrenaline made everything sharp and slow at the same time. 3 other ODSTs were already there. Sergeant Vickers, Corporal Chen, Private Torres. All of us breathing hard, all of us bleeding from somewhere. Vickers looked at me, took a tactical assessment in half a second. You hit? Just bruised. I lied. We both knew I was hit worse than that, but being hit did not matter. Being able to fight mattered. Chen was working on a communications array, trying to establish contact with command. Torres was on overwatch, his sniper rifle tracking targets through the smoke. Vickers keyed the squad channel. All pods, status report, rally on 752. We are establishing a perimeter. The responses came in broken fragments. Pod 734, 2 KIA, 1 wounded, moving to rally point. Pod 761, under heavy fire, cannot move. Pod 728. No response. Pod 745. Occupied. Need support. Pod 770. Destroyed on landing. No survivors. This is how it always went. You planned for a perfect drop, 50 troopers landing in formation, establishing a perimeter, executing the mission. What you got was chaos. Half your force dead before boots hit ground, the rest scattered, wounded. Fighting just to survive long enough to complete the objective, Chen got the communication array working. Command channel opened. This is Squad 75. We are on ground at Firebase Epsilon. Heavy Covenant presence. Multiple casualties. Requesting immediate reinforcement. The response was not what we wanted to hear. 7-5, be advised. No. Reinforcements available. Complete your mission and extract via alternate route. Firebase is lost. Recover what personnel you can and fall back. Vickers cursed. Looked at me. Looked at Chen. Looked at Torres. 4 ODSTs against an entire Covenant occupation force. This was the job. This was always the job. Chen started marking targets. 2 Wraiths providing fire support from the north perimeter. Multiple infantry squads securing the garrison buildings. Unknown number of hostiles inside the command center. Torres adjusted his scope. I can take out the infantry, but those Wraiths will tear us apart if we try to cross open ground. Vickers thought for maybe 5 seconds. Then he made the decision. We split up. Torres, you and Chen provide suppressing fire. Keep those Wraiths busy. Graves and I will move through the garrison, find survivors, set demolition charges, blow the command center, and fall back. I nodded. Suicide mission, but that was what Helljumpers did. We dropped in situations where no one else could. We did the jobs. No one else survived. We earned our reputation 1 drop at a time, 1 mission at a time, 1 death at a time. Vickers and I moved out, low and fast, using the smoke for cover. The garrison was a nightmare, bodies everywhere, Marines and ODSTs who had been stationed here, gunned down, burned, left where they fell. I stepped over a corpse with no face. Plasma had melted the helmet and everything inside. Further in, we found a barricade. 3 Marines still alive, still fighting, barely. 1 was missing an arm, tourniquet tied above the elbow, still holding a pistol in his remaining hand, still firing at Covenant moving through the compound. We pulled them back, got them to cover. The 1 armed Marine looked at me. His eyes were shock wide, trauma setting in. He grabbed my armor with his good hand. They came in fast, hundreds of them. We did not have a chance. We never had a chance. I pulled his hand off my chest plate. You are alive. Stay alive. We are getting you out. But I knew the truth. We were not getting anyone out. We were all going to die here on Harvest. Just like everyone else who had tried to hold this rock against the Covenant, Vickers set the demolition charges in the command center, enough explosives to level the entire building, enough to make sure the Covenant could not use whatever intelligence was stored here. We had maybe 3 minutes before the charges blew, 3 minutes to get back to the rally point, 3 minutes to extract. We ran. The wounded Marine we had found could not keep up. He fell behind. I heard him scream, heard plasma fire, did not look back, could not look back. Looking back got you killed. We reached the rally point with 90 seconds to spare. Chen and Torres were still there, still firing, still holding the position against impossible odds. Torres had blood running down his face. Shrapnel from a near miss. Chen's armor was scorched black across the chest, but they were alive. For now. The charges detonated. The command center erupted in fire. The shockwave hit us like a physical blow. The ground shook. Debris rained from the sky. And then the Wraiths turned toward us. Both of them. Their plasma mortars charging. This is the part they never tell you about being an ODST. The moment when you realize the mission is complete, but you are not getting out. The moment when survival stops being a possibility and becomes a question of how long you can hold, how many enemies you can take with you, how much time you can buy for someone else. Vickers looked at the Wraiths, looked at us, made a decision. Chen, Torres, fall back to the secondary extraction point. Graves and I will buy you time. That was it. No argument, no debate. Chen and Torres understood. They moved. Vickers and I took position behind the remains of a destroyed warthog. We had maybe 20 rounds between us. We had 2 grenades. We had about 90 seconds before those wraiths turned us into vapor. I looked at Vickers. He looked at me. We both knew how this ended. Feet first into hell. That was the motto. But nobody ever talked about what happened when you got there. When hell was not a metaphor. When it was plasma and fire and the screaming of dying men, the wraiths opened fire. Plasma mortars arced through the air like comets, blue-white spheres of superheated death. The first one hit 30 feet to our left. The impact vaporized a section of the perimeter wall, turned concrete and steel into molten slag. The heat washed over us even from that distance. My armor's temperature sensors screamed warnings. The second mortar hit closer, 20 feet, then 15. They were adjusting their aim, finding the range. In another 10 seconds, they would bracket our position perfectly. Then it would be over. Vickers grabbed my shoulder. When I move, you run. Straight back. Do not stop. Do not look. Just run. I understood what he was saying, what he was offering. One of us could. Maybe draw their fire. Give the other a chance. Maybe. He started to move. Started to stand. I grabbed his arm, pulled him back down. No. We both go, or neither goes. We are Helljumpers. We drop together. We die together. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. On 3. 1, 2. We never made it to 3. A Pelican dropship screamed out of the smoke, came in low and fast. Its chin-mounted machine gun opened up on the wraiths. Tracer rounds walked across their armor. The Covenant vehicles turned, shifted their fire to this new threat. The Pelican banked hard. Missiles launched from its wing pods. 2 streaks of white smoke. 2 impacts. The first wraith exploded, purple flame and twisted metal. The second took the hit on its frontal armor. Survived, but it was damaged, smoking. The pilot's voice crackled over the open channel. Any UNSC personnel on the ground, this is Pelican 9-7. I am your ride out of hell. You have 30 seconds before this entire sector is overrun. Move now. Vickers and I did not need to be told twice. We ran, sprinted across open ground toward where the Pelican was hovering. Its rear bay door was open. Chen and Torres were already there, already climbing aboard. We reached them with maybe 5 seconds to spare. The moment my boots hit the Pelican's deck, the pilot gunned it. We shot skyward. G-forces pressed me down. I grabbed a handhold, held on. Through the open bay door, I watched Harvest fall away below us, watched the firebase burn, watched Covenant reinforcements pour into the compound we had just abandoned. We had completed the mission, destroyed the command center, denied the enemy whatever intelligence was there, but it felt like a loss. It always felt like a loss. The pilot leveled us out at 3,000 meters, got us above most of the anti-aircraft fire. I finally let go of the handhold, slid down against the bulkhead, let the adrenaline drain out, let the pain in. My ribs were definitely broken, maybe 3 of them. My chest was one massive bruise. Every breath felt like someone was driving a knife between my lungs. Torres was worse. The shrapnel wound on his face was deep, bone deep. Chen was trying to stop the bleeding with field dressing, trying to keep him conscious. Vickers just sat there, stared at nothing. I had seen that look before, on other ODSTs after other drops. The look of someone calculating how many brothers they lost today. The Pelican pilot spoke again. His voice was steadier now, less urgent. You boys are lucky. Another 5 minutes, and I would not have been able to get through. Covenant have air superiority over that entire region. Command is pulling everyone back, abandoning the surface. Lucky. That was one word for it. I looked at Torres, looked at Chen, looked at Vickers. 4 survivors out of a 50-man drop, 46 KIA. That was an 88% casualty rate. That was just another Tuesday in the Orbital Drop Shock Troopers. We made it back to the UNSC carrier that had deployed us, made it to medical. They patched Torres up, 3 hours of surgery to reconstruct his face. They wrapped my ribs, gave me painkillers, told me I would be cleared for duty in 2 weeks. 2 weeks, That was how long the UNSC gave you to heal before they sent you back down, back into another pod, back into another drop. I spent those 2 weeks thinking about the drop, about the 46 who did not make it back, about the one-armed Marine I left behind, about how close I came to being just another name on the casualty list. That was 2,548. I made 17 more combat drops before the war ended in 2553. 17 more times I strapped into a pod and let them shoot me at a planet. 17 more times I survived when statistics said I should not. Want to know what it is really like to be an ODST? It is not the glory they show in the recruitment videos. It is not the medals or the commendations or the dress uniforms. It is the moment before the drop, when you check your rifle for the 10th time because you need something to do with your hands. It is the smell of fear sweat and recycled air and blood. It is landing in the middle of a firefight and realizing your pod came down 200 meters from where it was supposed to. It is watching your brothers die and knowing there is nothing you can do about it. It is completing the mission even when the mission makes no sense, even when you know you are being thrown away. That is what we were, expendable, replaceable, just bodies in pods. Bullets being fired at problems the UNSC could not solve any other way, but we kept dropping, kept volunteering, kept strapping into those coffins and letting them fire us at hell. You want to know why? Because someone had to. Because the Spartans could not be everywhere. Because regular Marines did not have the training or the equipment or the mentality to do what needed doing. Because when a situation was bad enough, that command was willing to accept 90% casualties just to complete an objective. They called the ODSTs. They called the Helljumpers. They called us. I made it through selection in 2544, 23 years old. Already a veteran of 4 campaigns with the Standard Marine Corps. Already seen enough combat to last most people a lifetime. But I wanted more. Wanted to be part of something elite. Wanted to prove I was more than just another grunt with a rifle. The ODST selection process was brutal. 3 weeks of physical training that broke half the candidates, daily runs that left you vomiting in the dirt, obstacle courses that seemed designed to kill you, live fire exercises where the simulation was indistinguishable from actual combat, slush and artificial snow, and scenarios where you had to operate in conditions that would stop a normal unit cold. They tested everything: your strength, your endurance, your mental resilience, your ability to function under stress, your willingness to follow orders, even when those orders were suicide. Out of 200 candidates in my class, 37 made it through. The rest washed out. Injuries, psychological breaks, failure to meet standards. The UNSC did not want good soldiers. They wanted the best. They wanted people who could drop from orbit into an active combat zone and still complete the mission. After selection came the training. Months of it. Urban warfare, close quarters combat, demolitions, communications, vehicle operation, survival skills. Everything you needed to operate independently behind enemy lines with minimal support. They taught us how to drop. That was the core of everything. The single occupant exo-atmospheric insertion vehicle, the SOEIV, the pod, our metal coffin. They started us in simulators, taught us the physics, the G-forces, the disorientation, the sensory overload. Then they moved us to actual drops, low altitude, at first, just a few thousand feet, getting us used to the sensation of freefall, the pod rattling around you, the computer systems screaming warnings. The moment of impact, we lost 2 trainees in training drops, mechanical failures. One pod's braking thrusters did not fire. He hit the ground at terminal velocity. The impact crater was 15 feet deep. The other pod's heat shield failed during re-entry. He burned up in the atmosphere, never even reached the ground. They showed us the wreckage afterward, made sure we understood. This was not a game. This was not a simulation. This was a weapons system that used human beings as ammunition. And sometimes, that ammunition failed to deliver. They gave us minor augmentations, nothing like what the Spartans got, Nothing that required kidnapping children and rebuilding their entire bodies, but still, metabolic enhancements to let us operate longer on less food and water, chemical treatments to speed up blood clotting, give us a better chance of surviving wounds in the field. Some candidates did not react well. Their bodies rejected the treatments. They washed out or died. The rest of us became something more than human, but less than Spartan, fast enough to keep up, tough enough to survive, skilled enough to complete missions that would kill a standard Marine unit. But we did not have MJOL in our armor. We did not have energy shields or enhanced reflexes or bones that could not break. We had ceramic plating and titanium frames, and the hope that we were fast enough and lucky enough to survive. Most of us were not. The average life expectancy for an ODST during the Human Covenant War was 7 combat drops. 7. I made 18. That made me either very good or very lucky. Probably both. Definitely lucky. After harvest, they sent us to Reach, August 2552. The planet was already falling when we arrived. Covenant supercarrier had blown through the orbital defenses. Ground forces were overwhelming every defensive position. Command was evacuating what they could, destroying what they could not take. We dropped into New Alexandria. The city was burning. Civilian evacuations were still ongoing. Our job was to hold key positions long enough for the transports to get out, hold them against an enemy that outnumbered us 100 to 1. I landed on a rooftop. My pod slammed through a skylight and crashed into an office building. Glass and concrete everywhere. The impact broke my left arm. I felt the bones snap, felt the hot spike of pain shoot up to my shoulder. I kicked the pod door open anyway, got out, used my right hand to pull my rifle from the weapon rack, moved to the stairwell. 2 other ODSTs landed nearby, Corporal Hines, Private Nakamura. We held that building for 6 hours, 6th floor to the 20th, room to room, floor to floor. Every time the Covenant pushed up the stairwell, we pushed them back. Grenades, rifles. When we ran out of ammunition, we took Covenant weapons, plasma rifles, needlers, whatever worked. My broken arm stopped mattering after the first hour. The pain just became background noise, something my brain learned to ignore because stopping meant dying. We extracted when the building started to collapse. Covenant artillery had been pounding the surrounding blocks. The entire structure was compromised. We rappelled down the outside, 30 floors on an emergency line with plasma fire all around us, made it to ground level with maybe 90 seconds before the tower came down. Watched it fall, watched it crush an entire city block, watched the dust cloud roll across the street like a tsunami. Reach fell. We knew it would. Everyone knew. But we held anyway, bought time, got people out. That was the job. That was always the job. After Reach came Earth, October 2552. The Covenant found our homeworld. The war came home. I was part of the 103rd Shock Troops Battalion by then, stationed aboard the Brahm, UNSC, say my name. When the Prophet of Regrets carrier jumped into Earth's atmosphere, Command put together Operation Bumrush. Orbital insertion directly into the carrier hull. Board the ship. Capture or kill the Prophet. End the invasion before it started. We launched from low orbit. 50 pods targeting the carrier's ventral surface. The plan was to punch through the hull, use the pod's momentum to breach the armor, deploy inside the ship, take the Covenant by surprise. It almost worked. We were 30 seconds from impact when Regret's carrier jumped to slipspace. From inside the atmosphere, the shockwave was massive. EMP fried every pod's electronics. We lost power, lost control, lost everything. I fell. My pod tumbled end over end. No thrusters. No computer. No idea which way was up. Just falling blind through the air above New Mombasa. I hit something. A building maybe. The pod bounced. Spun. Hit something else. I felt the titanium frame crumple. Felt the impact crush into my chest. Felt ribs break. Again. Different ribs this time. The pod finally stopped moving. I hung there in the harness. Stunned. Bleeding. Trying to figure out if I was alive or dead. The hatch would not open. Electronic release was dead. Mechanical backup was jammed. I was trapped, sealed inside a broken pod in the middle of a war zone. I could hear fighting outside, plasma fire, human weapons, screaming. I kicked the hatch, once, twice. Third time it gave way, fell off into the street. I crawled out, fell 4 feet to the pavement, landed hard, lay there for maybe 30 seconds just breathing, just being alive. New Mombasa was chaos. The EMP had knocked out every electronic system in the city, traffic lights, vehicles, communications, the superintendent AI that ran the city's infrastructure. Everything was dead, and the Covenant were moving in. Occupation forces, brutes mostly, some elites, grunts and jackals and hunters, all of them hunting for UNSC personnel who survived the drop. I found my rifle, found my bearings, started moving toward what I hoped was friendly territory. The city was a maze, streets I did not recognize, buildings I had never seen, and it was dark. The EMP had killed the power grid. No lights, except fires. No guidance, except instinct. I linked up with other survivors throughout the night. A Marine platoon pinned down in a parking structure. I helped them break out. An ODST fire team trying to reach an extraction point. We moved together, fought together. By dawn, we had maybe 30 personnel, mixed units, different branches. All of us just trying to survive long enough to regroup. We found out later that most of the drop pods had crashed, scattered across the city. The majority of the ODSTs who launched never made it, dead on impact, trapped in their pods, killed before they could deploy. Alpha 9 got lucky, the squad that would become famous. Buck, Dutch, Mickey, Romeo, the rookie. They survived, completed their mission, got out. Most of us did not. Most of us died in the streets of New Mombasa, alone, cut off, fighting until we ran out of ammunition or the Covenant ran us down. I made it out 3 days later. Pelican extraction from a rooftop in Sector 7. By then, I had been awake for 72 hours straight, running on adrenaline and stims, and the knowledge that sleep meant death. They pulled me off the line after that. Medical discharge, too many injuries, too many drops, too much trauma. I was 28 years old. I had served 4 years as an ODST, made 18 combat drops, survived engagements that killed everyone around me, and now I was done, retired. They gave me a medal, told me I was a hero, sent me home, home. That was a strange concept. I had not had a home in 4 years, had not thought about anything except the next mission, the next drop, the next fight. Now suddenly I was supposed to go back to a normal life, supposed to forget everything I had seen, everyone I had lost, supposed to pretend that I was the same person who had volunteered for ODST selection back in 2544. But I was not that person anymore. That person died somewhere between the first drop and the 18th, somewhere in the gap between launch and impact, somewhere in the moments when I was falling and did not know if I would survive. What do you think it does to a person? 18 drops, 18 times strapping into a metal coffin and letting them fire you at a planet, 18 times surviving when better men died. You start to wonder why you survived when they did not. What made you special? What made you worth saving? And the answer is nothing. Nothing made you special. You survived because of luck, because your pod landed 10 feet to the left instead of 10 feet to the right, because a plasma bolt missed you by inches, because someone else drew the fire that would have killed you. Survivor's guilt. That is what the doctors called it. As if putting a name on it made it better. As if understanding why you felt broken somehow fixed you. They offered therapy, medications, support groups with other veterans who could not adjust to civilian life. I did not go. What was I supposed to say? That I missed it? That part of me wanted to be back in the pod, back in the drop? That the terror and the violence and the constant proximity to death was the only thing that made me feel alive? The war ended in March 2553. The Covenant fell apart. The elites turned against the prophets. Humanity survived. Barely. But we survived. They called it a victory. Maybe it was. But it did not feel like one. Not to those of us who lived through it, not to those of us who dropped feet first into hell and somehow climbed back out. I tried to adjust, tried to be normal, got a job, got an apartment, went through the motions of civilian life, but I could not sleep, could not relax, could not stop scanning every room for exits and threats and cover positions, could not stop flinching at loud noises, could not stop seeing their faces, the ones who did not make it back. Torres with half his face blown off, the one-armed Marine on Harvest, the crushed pods in New Mombasa, all the brothers and sisters who dropped beside me and never made it home. They stayed with me, haunted me, reminded me every day that I lived and they died, and there was no reason for it except random chance. That is what they do not tell you about being an ODST. They tell you about the glory, the elite status, the reputation. What they do not tell you is what happens after, when the drops stop, when the war ends, when you are left with nothing but memories of falling and the faces of the dead. I lasted 2 years in civilian life, 2 years of pretending. Then in 2555, I got a call. Spartangent 4 program was recruiting. They wanted experienced Special Operations personnel, ODSTs, Spartans from the earlier programs who had been discharged, anyone with the skills and the mentality to undergo augmentation and join the new generation of super soldiers. I said yes, immediately, did not even think about it, because anything was better than trying to be normal. Anything was better than the nightmares and the guilt and the empty feeling that came from not having a mission. The Spartangent 4 augmentation process was different from what they did to the E's and I's. We were adults. Our bodies were fully developed. The procedures were safer, more refined, higher success rate. They rebuilt me, made me stronger, faster, more durable, gave me MJOLNIR armor, made me into something I was never meant to be, a real super soldier, not just an ODST pretending. But here is what they did not change. Here is what the augmentation could not fix. The memories, the guilt, the knowledge that I survived 18 drops through nothing but luck that is still there, still waiting, still reminding me that I am alive because better people died. The Spartangent 4 program gave me new armor, new augmentations, a new designation, but it could not give me back the brothers I lost, could not undo the drops, could not erase the muscle memory of strapping into a pod and knowing there was a good chance I would never come out. Some of the other Spartangent 4s were former ODSTs like me, Edward Buck, Gretchen Catola, Taylor Miles. We recognized each other immediately, not by our faces or our names, by the way we moved, the way we checked our gear 3 times before a mission, the way we never fully relaxed, never fully trusted that we were safe. That was the ODST legacy. That was what 18 drops, or 20 drops, or however many drops, carved into your soul. A permanent understanding that safety was an illusion, that death was always one malfunction away, one bad landing, one piece of shrapnel with your name on it. Buck understood. He had been there, dropped on New Mombasa with Alpha 9, survived when the entire operation went sideways, lost the rookie years later to insurrectionists, watched his team fall apart. He carried the same weight I did, the same knowledge that command sent us into situations where survival was optional and completing the mission was mandatory. We talked about it once, just once. Late at night in the Spartangent 4 training facility on Ivanov Station, both of us running through combat drills because neither of us could sleep. He asked me how many drops I made. 18, I told him. He nodded. 23 for me. Lost count of how many times I should have died. I asked him if the augmentations made it better, if being a Spartan instead of an ODST changed anything. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he said something I will never forget. The armor is better. The body is stronger. But the drop is still the drop. You are still falling. Still wondering if this is the one that kills you. Still hearing the pods that did not make it. Being a Spartan just means you survive long enough to feel guilty about it. That was the truth nobody wanted to acknowledge. The Spartangent eyes were legends. Master Chief, Blue Team, the heroes who saved humanity, but they were created from children, kidnapped at age 6, trained until they were perfect, augmented until they were superhuman. They never had a choice, never knew anything except being soldiers. We were different, the ODSTs. We volunteered. We chose this life, chose to strap into those pods, chose to drop feet first into hell. And that choice made all the difference because we knew what we were giving up, knew the statistics, knew that most Helljumpers did not survive long enough to retire. We did it anyway. Why? That is the question everyone asks. Why volunteer for a unit with an 88% casualty rate? Why choose to be human ammunition? Why drop from orbit when dropships existed, when conventional insertion was safer? The answer is complicated. Part of it was pride. The ODSTs were elite, the best humanity had to offer before the Spartans came along. Being selected meant something, meant you were tougher and meaner and more committed than the standard Marine. Part of it was the mission. ODSTs went places no one else could, behind enemy lines, into hot zones, onto planets where the Covenant had total air superiority. We were the first wave, the shock troops, the ones who softened the target before the main force arrived. But if I am being honest, part of it was the drop itself. That moment of controlled chaos, that sensation of falling through fire and death and somehow surviving, it was addictive, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Every time you landed, every time you kicked that pod door open and stepped out alive, you felt invincible, like you had cheated death again, like you were special, until you looked around and saw the pods that did not open, the ones that burned on re-entry or got shot down or crashed too hard. Then you remembered you were not special. You were just lucky, and luck runs out. I watched it run out for a lot of good soldiers. Harvest, Reach, Earth, dozens of smaller engagements in between. Every drop claimed its casualties. Every mission left empty pods scattered across the battlefield. We learned to not get attached. That was the unofficial first rule of being an ODST. Do not learn their names. Do not make friends. Do not invest emotionally in people who had a 7-drop life expectancy. But humans are not wired that way. You drop beside someone. You fight beside them. You watch them save your life or you save theirs. You bond whether you want to or not, and then they die, and you carry that, add it to the collection. Stack it on top of all the others who died while you survived. After a while, the weight becomes crushing. After a while, you start to wonder if you are living on borrowed time. If every drop you survive is just delaying the inevitable. I knew ODSTs who cracked, who could not handle it anymore. Some requested transfer to standard Marine units, took the dishonor rather than strap into another pod. Some just disappeared, went AWOL, vanished into the colonies or the outer rim. Some ate their sidearms, quick, clean, final. Command did not talk about those, did not acknowledge that the pressure of being a Helljumper broke people. They just cycled in new recruits, kept the machine running, kept dropping bodies onto planets until either the war ended or we ran out of bodies. We almost ran out. By 2552, ODST recruitment was struggling. Too many casualties, too many horror stories filtering back, too many young Marines seeing the statistics and deciding they would rather take their chances in a normal unit than volunteer for a 90% chance of dying in a metal coffin. The ones who did volunteer were either very brave or very damaged, maybe both. I was both. I volunteered because I wanted to prove something, wanted to be more than just another grunt. But I stayed because I did not know how to be anything else. The drop became my identity. The pod became my purpose. Everything else was just waiting between missions, waiting for the next launch, the next fall, the next chance to survive or die. You want to know what scared me most during my time as an ODST? Not the drop, not the landing, not the combat. It was the possibility that the war would end before I died, that I would survive, that I would have to figure out who I was without the pod, without the mission, without the constant proximity to death. That fear turned out to be justified. The war ended. I survived, and I spent 2 years Being lost before the Spartan program gave me a new purpose. But a lot of ODSTs did not get that option. A lot of them died, still believing they were doing something that mattered, still believing the sacrifice was worth it. If you have ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I will be reading them. Would you volunteer knowing the odds? Would you strap into that pod knowing you probably would not come back? Or would you choose the safer path? I am not judging either way. I made my choice, but I understand both sides. Here is something else they do not tell you about ODST drops. The pods were never meant to be survivable for normal humans. The G-forces during launch, the heat during re-entry, the impact on landing, all of it pushed the limits of what an unaugmented body could handle. The crash webbing and inertial dampeners helped. The armor helped, but people still died from the drop itself. Before they ever engaged the enemy, before they ever fired a shot, internal bleeding, spinal compression, traumatic brain injury from the impacts, we called it pod death. Dying in the metal coffin before you ever got a chance to fight. It happened more than command admitted. Pods would land. The door would blow. The occupant would be dead in the harness. Sometimes there were no external signs, no visible injuries, just a body that had endured more force than human tissue could survive. The ODSTs, who survived multiple drops, developed chronic issues, compressed vertebrae, joint problems, microfractures that never fully healed. By the time I retired at 28, my spine was a mess. My knees were shot. I had arthritis in joints that should not have arthritis for another 30 years. The minor augmentations helped, the increased healing factor, the metabolic enhancements, but they could not undo the cumulative damage of 18 drops. 18 times, my body was compressed and shaken and slammed around inside a pod. The Spartan 4 augmentation fixed some of that, rebuilt my bone structure, reinforced my joints, made me more durable, but I still feel it. On cold days or after heavy combat, phantom pains from injuries that technically do not exist anymore, my body remembering what it endured. The Spartans had it different. The Spartan ties dropped in pods sometimes. Master Chief used them, so did the rest of Blue Team, but they had MJOLNR armor. They had energy shields and enhanced reflexes and bones that were practically unbreakable. A drop that would cripple an ODST was just another Tuesday for a Spartan, and that created tension. The ODSTs resented the Spartans initially. Before the war, when the Spartan 2 program was still classified, we were the elite, the tip of the spear. Then suddenly these armored giants appeared, faster than us, stronger than us, better than us in every measurable way. Some ODSTs refused to acknowledge it, insisted we were still the best, that the Spartans were just lab experiments, gene freaks who did not earn their status. But most of us understood the truth. The Spartans were what we wanted to be, what we could never be. They were everything we aspired to, taken to the logical extreme, and that was hard to accept. But the war changed things, forced us to work together, forced us to see that the Spartans were not the enemy. We fought beside them, watched them save civilian transports and hold positions against impossible odds and do the dirty work that nobody else could. Watch them die too, because for all their augmentations and armor, they were still mortal, still fallible. Master Chief survived the war, but not all of them did. Sam, James, Cal, dozens of others whose names never made it into the history books. They dropped, they fought, they died, just like us, just with better gear. After the war, some ODSTs transitioned to the Spartan 4 program, but many did not, could not, would not. They stayed Marine, stayed ODST, kept that identity even when the war was over and the pods were mothballed and the drops stopped, because being an ODST was not just a job, it was who they were, what they had become. I understand that. Even now as a Spartan, even with the new armor and the new abilities and the new designation, part of me will always be an ODST, will always hear the countdown before launch, will always feel the pod shaking during re-entry, will always remember the exact moment the door blows and you step out not knowing if you will survive the next 30 seconds. That is the legacy of the Helljumpers. That is what we carry forever. The Covenant are gone now. The war is over. But humanity still has enemies. Insurrectionists, the created, remnant Covenant factions, the banished. And when situations arise that are too dangerous for normal forces, they still call us. Not ODSTs anymore, Spartans now, but the mission is the same. Drop into hell, complete the objective, survive if you can. The difference is now I have a better chance. The MJOLNI armor, the enhanced physiology, the training that built on top of my ODST experience. I am faster and stronger and tougher than I ever was in the pod, but I am not invincible. None of us are. Spartans die too. We just die harder. I deployed to Meridian in 2558, hunting the banished. They had established a stronghold in the ruins of a glassed city. Command wanted it cleared. Sent in a Spartan fire team. My team, we dropped via pod, old, habits die hard. Even with pelicans and dropships available, sometimes the fastest way in is still straight down. I strapped into the SOEIV, different model than what I used during the war. Updated, more advanced, but fundamentally the same, single occupant, exo-atmospheric insertion, controlled fall, and that same smell, fear, and recycled air, and the knowledge that you are about to drop into a combat zone. The launch felt different in MJOLNIR armor. The suit absorbed more of the impact. The energy shields provided an extra layer of protection, but the fear was the same. The uncertainty was the same. The question of whether this would be the drop that finally killed me was the same. We hit the atmosphere. 4 pods in diamond formation, plasma fire from banished anti-aircraft emplacements. Not as heavy as Covenant fire used to be, not as accurate, but still dangerous. A pod to my right took a hit. Shields absorbed it, kept falling. We all kept falling. That is what you do when you are a Helljumper. Spartan or not, you keep falling until you hit the ground. We landed in the target zone, kicked our doors, engaged immediately. Brutes, jackals, grunts, the same enemies I had fought during the war, but now I fought them in armor that made me their equal, made me strong enough to flip a warthog, fast enough to dodge plasma fire, tough enough to take hits that would have killed me as an ODST. We cleared the stronghold in 40 minutes, 0 casualties, mission complete. But when I was back on the ship, back in the barracks, I still felt it, the ghost of the old drops, the memory of pods that did not open, of brothers who died while I survived. That never goes away. Augmentations cannot fix it. Armor cannot protect against it. It is just part of who you are now, part of what you become when you drop feet first into hell enough times. Some nights I still dream about it. The countdown, the launch, the fall. In the dreams, I am always in the old armor, the ODST battle dress uniform, not MJOLNIR, just ceramic and titanium, and the pod never lands. I just keep falling, forever, through fire and plasma and the screaming of dying men. That is the real hell, not the combat, not the enemy, not even the death. It is the fall, the endless, terrible fall, knowing you are going to hit, knowing it is going to hurt, knowing you might not survive, but being unable to do anything except wait. That is what being an ODST taught me, that sometimes all you can do is fall and hope you are lucky enough to land in one piece. I was lucky, 18 times. Then I became a Spartan and got luckier still. But the ones who did not make it, the ones who burned on re-entry, or crashed too hard, or got shot down before they deployed, they were just as skilled, just as trained, just as committed. They just were not lucky. That is the truth nobody wants to admit. That skill and training and courage only get you so far. The rest is luck, random chance, being in the right place or the wrong place by inches or seconds. And if your luck runs out, you die in a pod, alone, sealed in metal, maybe conscious when you hit, maybe aware as the impact crushes you, maybe alive for those few final seconds, wondering what you could have done differently. I have thought about that a lot, about the ones who died in their pods, about what their last moments were like, whether they knew, whether they had time to be afraid. Whether they thought about home or family or just the mission, I hope they thought about the mission. I hope they died believing it mattered, that their sacrifice meant something, that humanity would survive because they dropped. Whether that is true or not, I do not know. Maybe the war would have been won without us. Maybe the Spartans would have carried the weight alone. Maybe the ODSTs were always just placeholders, expendable bodies thrown at problems until the real soldiers arrived. But we dropped anyway. We strapped in anyway. We fell anyway, because someone had to. Because the alternative was letting the Covenant win. Because feet first into hell was not just a motto. It was a promise, a commitment, a willingness to die in the worst possible way if that is what the mission required. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the war, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. I am older now, wiser maybe. The war is over. The dropping has mostly stopped. I am a Spartan, part of humanity's new generation of super soldiers. But I will never stop being an ODST. Will never stop hearing the countdown before launch. Will never stop feeling the pod shake during re-entry. Will never stop seeing their faces, the ones who did not make it back. That is what 18 drops cost me. That is what surviving cost me. And I would do it again, every time, every drop, because that is what we were. That is what we are. Helljumpers. The crazy ones who volunteered to be shot at planets. The expendable ones who dropped when nobody else could. The lucky ones who survived long enough to tell the story. We dropped feet first into hell, and somehow, against all odds, some of us made it back. Not all of us, never all of us, but enough to remember, enough to carry the weight, enough to make sure that nobody forgets what it cost, what it really cost. Not in resources or equipment or strategic objectives, but in bodies, in pods that never opened, in Helljumpers who made their last drop and never came home. There is a memorial on Reach now. They rebuilt parts of it after the war, turned the glassed wastelands into monuments, turned the battlefields into graveyards. One of those monuments is for the ODSTs, a black granite wall with names carved into it. Thousands of names, tens of thousands. Every Helljumper who died during the Human Covenant War. I went there once in 2556, stood in front of that wall for 3 hours, running my fingers over the names, finding the ones I knew. Torres, KIA New Alexandria, August 2552. Hines, KIA Reach, August 2552. Nakamura, KIA Reach, August 2552. The one-armed Marine from Harvest. His name was Corporal David Chen. I never knew that until I saw it on the wall. Never knew his first name, never knew anything about him except that he died holding a pistol in his remaining hand while I ran. Every name on that wall represents a drop that went wrong, a pod that malfunctioned, a landing that was too hard, a firefight that could not be won. Every name is someone who volunteered, someone who chose this, someone who knew the odds and strapped in anyway. And for what? That is the question that haunts me. What did we accomplish? We dropped on Harvest. The Covenant glassed it anyway. We dropped on Reach. It fell. We dropped on Earth. New Mombasa was occupied, then evacuated, then glassed. All those drops, all those deaths, all those pods scattered across a dozen burning worlds, and humanity barely survived. Master Chief saved us in the end. The Spartans, the heroes, not the ODSTs, not the Helljumpers. We were just the opening act, the warm-up, the expendable troops who bought time with our lives so the real soldiers could win the war. That sounds bitter. Maybe it is. Maybe 18 drops and too many dead brothers earned me the right to be bitter. But it is also the truth. The UNSC threw us away, used us up, dropped us into situations where survival was not expected, where casualties were acceptable as long as the mission got done. They called us elite, called us special, called us the best. What they meant was we were willing to die when others were not. That was our special skill, not our training or our equipment or our tactics. Our willingness to accept death as part of the job description. The average ODST dropped 7 times before dying. 7 missions, 7 pods, 7 chances to get lucky. I dropped 18 times. That makes me an outlier, an anomaly, someone who survived more than twice as long as expected. You know what that taught me? It taught me that the only difference between the dead and the living is luck, pure random chance. The Marine who died in the first drop and the ODST who survived 20 drops had the same training, same equipment, same commitment. One just happened to land in a hot zone, the other happened to land in a clear area. One's pod happened to malfunction, the other's worked perfectly. Luck, that is all it ever was. And the UNSC knew it. They knew that dropping 50 ODSTs meant losing 44 of them. They knew the math. They factored it into their planning. Expected casualties, acceptably losses. They sent us anyway. Because sometimes you need to put bodies on the ground fast. Sometimes you need shock troops who can get there before conventional forces. Sometimes you need someone willing to die to complete an objective. That is what the ODSTs were. That is what we will always be. Human ammunition fired at problems. After I became a Spartan, they asked me to speak at ODST graduation ceremonies, tell the new recruits what it means to be a Helljumper, give them the speech about honor and duty and sacrifice. I refused. What was I supposed to tell them? That most of them would die in their first year? That the average life expectancy was 7 drops? That they were volunteering to be expendable? Command was not happy about that. Said I was being negative. Said the recruits needed inspiration, needed to believe they were joining something special, but I could not lie to them. Could not stand there in my MJOLNR armor and tell them that being an ODST was glorious when I knew the truth. When I had seen the truth scattered across a dozen planets. So I told them something else instead. One time, at one ceremony, the only time they asked me, I told them that being an ODST means accepting that you might die in a metal coffin falling through fire. It means knowing that your pod might malfunction, that enemy fire might shoot you down, that you might land wrong and never wake up. It means accepting those possibilities and strapping in anyway, not because you are brave, not because you are special, but because someone has to. Because if everyone made the smart choice, if everyone chose the safe option, humanity would have fallen to the Covenant. We dropped because no one else would. The recruits stared at me. Some looked inspired. Most looked terrified. Command pulled me aside afterward, told me I was never speaking at another ceremony, told me I was scaring away potential volunteers. Good, they should be scared. They should know what they are volunteering for. They should understand that the recruitment videos lie, that the medals and commendations do not mean anything if you are dead in a pod, but they will keep volunteering anyway, because young Marines will always want to prove themselves, will always want to be elite, will always believe they are different, that the statistics do not apply to them, that they will be one of the lucky ones. Some of them will be, most will not. That is the cycle. That is how the UNSC kept the ODSTs operational for decades, despite catastrophic casualty rates. Fresh volunteers replacing the dead, new bodies climbing into old pods. The machine keeps running because people keep feeding it. I fed it for 4 years, 18 drops, then I survived, retired, became a Spartan. But I never stopped thinking about the ones who did not make it, never stopped wondering why I lived when they died. Survivor's guilt. That is what the psychologists call it, as if naming it makes it easier, as if understanding the mechanism of your trauma somehow reduces it. It does not. The guilt is still there, still waiting, still asking why you survived when better people died. I have talked to other ODSTs about this, the ones who survived long enough to retire, the ones who made it through the war. We all carry it, all wonder the same thing. All have nightmares about the pods that did not open. Some handle it better than others. Edward Buck channels it into being a better Spartan, uses his survival as motivation to protect others, to make sure their sacrifices were not wasted. Taylor Miles went back to civilian life, opened a bar on Venezia, serves drinks and tells war stories and tries to forget. Gretchen Kitola threw herself into training new Spartans, passes on everything she learned, makes sure the next generation is ready. Everyone copes differently. Everyone finds their own way to live with what they survived. I cope by talking about it, by telling the truth, by making sure people understand what the ODSTs really were. Not the propaganda version, not the recruitment video version, the real version. The one where most of us died, where survival was luck, where we were expendable ammunition in humanity's desperate fight for survival. Does that make our sacrifice meaningless? I do not know. Maybe we dropped on planets that fell anyway, fought battles that were lost, died in pods that crashed in places nobody remembers. Did we actually change anything? Or were we just buying time for the Spartans to win the war? I want to believe we mattered. I want to believe that every drop made a difference, that every ODST who died in a pod died for a reason, that their names on that memorial wall represent something more than wasted lives. But I have been a soldier long enough to know the truth. Wars are not won by individual sacrifices. They are won by logistics and strategy and resources, and sometimes just dumb luck. The UNSC won the Human Covenant War because the elites turned against the prophets, because the flood forced both sides to cooperate, because Master Chief destroyed the Ark, not because ODSTs dropped on Harvest or Reach or Earth. We were just noise in the background, just casualties in the footnotes, just bodies that bought a few extra hours or days or weeks, while the real war was won by people who were not us. That is hard to accept. That is the part nobody wants to say out loud. That most military deaths do not matter strategically, that individual soldiers are replaceable, that the UNSC would have won or lost the war regardless of what the ODSTs did. But it is true, and pretending otherwise dishonors the dead more than acknowledging it. They died believing they were making a difference. I hope they were right. I hope every drop mattered, every pod that opened, every firefight that was won. I hope it added up to something. But even if it did not, even if we were just throwing bodies at an unwinnable war, they still deserve to be remembered. Not as heroes, not as legends, just as people who volunteered for something terrible and died doing it. That is enough. That has to be enough, because it is all we have. The memorial wall, the names, the stories, the knowledge that for a brief moment in history, thousands of people strapped into metal coffins and dropped into hell because someone had to, because humanity needed bodies on the ground, because we chose to be those bodies. I am 43 years old now, 15 years since the war ended. I am still a Spartan, still operational, still taking missions when they come up, but I am also the last generation, the last cohort who remembers what the drops were really like. The Spartangent 4 program recruits from all branches now: Marines, Army, Navy. Some of them are former ODSTs, but most are not. Most never experienced the drop, never felt that moment of controlled chaos when you are falling through fire and praying your pod does not fail. The younger Spartans know the statistics, know the history, but they do not know the reality, cannot know it, because you cannot explain what it feels like to be human ammunition, to be expendable, to know you are probably going to die and strap in anyway. That is something you have to experience, and most of them never will. The ODST program still exists, technically, but the drops are rare now. Most insertions are done via Pelican or Condor or standard orbital insertion craft. The SOEIV is outdated technology, too dangerous, too many casualties, too expensive to maintain when safer options exist. The new generation of Spartans does not need them. We have better armor, better shields, better options. We can deploy from orbit without the coffin, without the risk, without the terror. Part of me is glad that fewer soldiers have to experience what I experienced, glad that the casualty rates are lower, glad that the UNSC learned something from throwing away thousands of ODSTs. But part of me mourns the end of an era, mourns the fact that in another generation, nobody will remember what it was really like. The memorial wall will still be there. The names will still be carved, but nobody will understand what those names represent. Nobody will know the smell of fear and recycled air, the sound of the pod shaking during re-entry, the moment of impact, and the prayer that you survived. That knowledge dies with us, with the last generation of Helljumpers who made it through the war. And maybe that is for the best. Maybe future soldiers should not have to carry what we carry, should not have to wonder why they survived when better people died, should not have to dream about falling, about pods that never open, about brothers and sisters who dropped beside them and never came home. Maybe letting it die is mercy, but it also feels like betrayal. Like we owe the dead more than just names on a wall, like their sacrifices should be remembered in full, not sanitized, not glorified, but honest. They died in terror, died in pain, died wondering if it mattered. They deserve for people to know that, to understand what the ODSTs really gave, not their lives. That is too simple. They gave their sanity, their peace, their ability to sleep without nightmares. They gave everything that makes life worth living and got back nothing but a name on a wall and the knowledge that they were expendable. That is the real cost. That is what nobody talks about. The psychological damage, the trauma, the inability to adjust to civilian life, the ODSTs who survived the war but could not survive the peace, the ones who ate their sidearms or drove their vehicles off cliffs or just disappeared, the walking wounded, the ones whose bodies survived but whose minds did not. I knew a dozen ODSTs who died after the war ended, died by their own hands, could not handle the transition, could not find a purpose without the drops, could not live with the memories and the guilt and the knowledge that they survived by luck. Nobody counts those as war casualties. Nobody adds those names to the memorial wall, but they should, because the war killed them just as surely as a plasma bolt or a crashed pod. I thought about it myself. After I retired, before I joined the Spartan 4 program, standing in my apartment at 0300, staring at my service pistol, thinking about how easy it would be, how quick, how final. Just another casualty of the war, just another ODST who could not handle surviving. I did not do it. Obviously, I am here, still talking, still breathing, still carrying the weight. But I understood the impulse, understood why others chose that path. When you have been falling for so long, when you have been in the pod for so long, solid ground feels wrong, feels unstable. You start to miss the fall, start to crave it, start to think that maybe you were supposed to die back then, that surviving was the mistake. The Spartan 4 program saved me from that, gave me a new purpose, a new mission, a reason to keep going. But not everyone got that option. Not everyone could become a Spartan. Most just had to figure out how to be human again, how to live without the drop, how to exist without the mission. Some managed, some did not, and nobody talks about it because it is uncomfortable, because it undermines the narrative, because admitting that the war destroyed us even when we survived means acknowledging that the cost was higher than anyone wants to calculate. I am talking about it now, putting it on record, making sure that when the last of us are gone, someone will know, someone will understand. The ODSTs were not just casualties in a war. We were people, flawed, scared, desperate. We volunteered for something insane. We dropped into hell. We survived or died based on luck, and those of us who survived carried the weight of those who did not. That is the story. That is the truth. Not glorious, not heroic, just human, just people doing something terrible because it needed to be done, and paying the price for it long after the war ended. If you made it this far, if you listened to all of this, then you know something most people do not. You know what it really cost. You know what the drops really were. You know why the ODSTs deserve to be remembered not as heroes, but as human beings who gave everything and got back trauma and guilt and nightmares. Remember that. Remember us. Remember the ones who did not come back. Remember the pods that never opened. Remember that every name on that memorial wall represents someone who was falling and hoping to land, and sometimes did not. Feet first into hell. That was our motto, our promise, our curse. We dropped, we fell, We landed or we did not. That was the job. That was always the job, and I would do it again. All 18 drops, all the terror, all the guilt, all the loss, because someone had to, because humanity needed Helljumpers, because we were the ones willing to be expendable. I survived. I became a Spartan. I am still here, still fighting, still carrying the weight, but part of me is still in the pod, still falling, still waiting for impact. That never goes away. That is the cost of being an ODST. The drop never ends. You just learn to live with the fall. You learn to function while falling. You learn that solid ground is an illusion, and the only certainty is gravity. That is what 18 drops taught me. That is what I carry. That is what I remember when I look at that memorial wall and see all those names. They dropped, they fell, they died, and I survived. Not because I was better, not because I was special, just because I was lucky. And every day I wake up is another day I get to carry their memory. Another day I get to tell their story. Another day I get to make sure nobody forgets what it costs to be a Helljumper, what it really cost. The war is over. The drops have mostly stopped. The ODSTs are fading into history, but the fall continues. For those of us who survived, for those of us who remember, we are still falling, still in the pod, still waiting for impact. That is our legacy. That is what we carry. And when the last of us is gone, when there is nobody left who remembers the smell of fear and recycled air, the memorial wall will still be there. The names will still be carved, and maybe someone will see them and wonder what it was like, what those people experienced, what they gave. If they do, I hope they understand this. The ODSTs were not legends. We were not heroes. We were just people who fell from orbit in metal coffins and sometimes survived. That is all. That is enough. Remember us that way, as Helljumpers, as the ones who dropped feet first into hell, as the ones who fell and kept falling and somehow made it matter.